I'm here on the campus of Big Sandy Community College and Technical Center. This journey began about a week ago in Morgantown, West Virginia. I headed to the town of Burton, West Virginia. This has been partially an effort to trace my family history, to walk in the footsteps of my first ancestors in this country, first Burton ancestors in this country. And I believe that man was Richard Francis Burton, Sir Richard Francis Burton. He later came to be known as. So the logic takes me to Burton, West Virginia, where a train ran, where he likely came into that train station just before heading down the Ohio River in New Martinsville, West Virginia, a short distance from Burton. His reputation was famous enough at that time that getting off the train station there could cause the town to be named after him. Although it's later said, now it says in West Virginia history books, as a man named Bartrug came into that station, and they misheard the name and misnamed it Burton. Okay. Well, anyhow, so I followed across New Martinsville River crossing, following down the Ohio River on Route 7 in Ohio. Took me down to around Huntington, where crossed over into Ashland, Kentucky, and then headed south along, apparently the Big Sandy River flows this way. Now that takes us to this premise of this, all far-fetched, mind you, and normal standard point was, because it came from a dream I had a couple years ago, that in the dream Donald Rumsfeld pointed to eastern Kentucky, said Burton, pointed to it. Well, been reading a biography about Richard Francis Burton. When he first came to America, he went to D.C. and met with a John Floyd. Well, John Floyd was the Secretary of War, which later came to be known as Secretary of Defense, the position that Donald Rumsfeld held. And reportedly in the biography, the reason he met with John Floyd is because he wanted to go to the frontier to battle the Indians, which part of his reputation and his writings is all about the speaking out for the lifestyles of indigenous peoples all over this world. The idea that he wanted to come fight against the Indians in America is illogical. What is very logical is that back in England, he was dating a Lady Isabel, who was from a high-up family that was gaining association with the crown of England, the throne. But he had a girlfriend, and she had a child, or a child soon to be born. And logic stands to reason that the big part of his purpose in coming to America and meeting with John Floyd was to find a place to settle this family in the New World, where the child could grow up and not be in the eye of the throne and Lady Isabel, and he'd be able to marry her without this barring reputation of having a bastard child, which in that day and age was unspeakable and immoral, and you couldn't marry in the royalty in that case. So anyhow, this child grew up. Now, tracing my own family history, my father's name was Sherman Dewey Burton, his father's name was Sherman Dewey Burton, and his father's name was Rufus Burton, also known as Rufus Gollaher and William Rufus. Well, the constant of his naming growing up and on his work records for the railroad was that he was Rufus, R-U-F-U-S, a synonym, an acronym perhaps. Not sure the actual word there, but a name that sounds, a nickname more or less, could be an official name, but it was used also as a first name and as a last name, which stands to reason that he had a official name that wanted to be put on him was William Gollaher. So his mother could have been a Gollaher, or she could have married a Gollaher here in the New World. But at some point he had heard of who his father was, I do believe, was as Richard Francis. Now then, when he married, he was able to, at that point, take the last name Burton himself, pass that name on to his wife and to his children. And he wouldn't have been able to do that without some sort of documentation. Now, all his documentation up until this, his railroad work documentation, was as William Rufus or Rufus Gollaher. So, here I am in Floyd County, following the, what originally started as a dream, later looked up on the map, and sure enough, there was a Burton in a little community named Burton in eastern Kentucky, right where in the dream Donald Rumsfeld pointed to. And it happens to be in Floyd County, named after a John Floyd. Same name as the Secretary of War that Richard Francis Burton met with. Okay, so it stands to reason he was directed to a patch of land that he could settle. It was definitely in, you know, still struggle times with the Indians, but therefore free to own if you're willing to settle it, which was not easily done. And so at this college I hope to find some records. Now, when I first got here to this campus, I met a maintenance man who was just unlocking the buildings and stuff. The library's not open yet, but it will be very soon. And me and him had a conversation about how he was able to find at this library's resource center some of his own ancestry. A grandfather who was, or great-grandfather, one of the two, that was interviewed in 1950, that was born shortly after Lincoln was assassinated, that had a lot of history that he told, you know. So this man was also very interested in history. Now, just in our general conversation, we came across the fact that this is information he gave me that is similar to some other information I've learned myself, but new to me. That Abraham Lincoln, when he spoke a speech at Niagara Falls, he talked about giants in the land of America. Now, this is something else that Richard Francis Burton would have also been interested in, because he was where all of his travels were always in curiosities of these ancient mysteries. So, following down the Ohio River is just north of New Martinsville is Moundsville, West Virginia, which he could have possibly visited and possibly boarded the Ohio River there. And then following it down, well, this man is he's on his wife's side is a descendant of a Indian, Tecumseh. This is how we got on the conversation, who was a 7-foot tall Indian. And then that's how I said, yeah, that, you know, it's tail under these mounds of very tall people. And then I didn't want to throw the word giant out, because, you know, already was giving him my story of how I was following a dream that brought me here, and then he's the one that mentioned the giants that Abraham Lincoln mentioned. And then we said, you know, so the history that sometimes you can't, I used to be really excited that everything was digitalized, because I thought it would help preserve information and spread it about very freely. But now I've come to learn also that the digitalized forms can be changed and suppressed and hidden more easily than the books can sometimes. Well, he was explaining to me that a couple years ago there was a large amount of this library's history reportedly, but there was mold on the books, so they had to get rid of them. So I'm hopeful of what I might find here, but also not going to be content that what I'm finding here is going to be the full story either. This man had not heard of the community of Burton in this county. That's not on the present Kentucky map, but it is still searchable, or last I looked, still searchable on the internet, and hopefully searchable in this Floyd County history was held in this library. So that's where this adventure and this search quest is at this juncture. And soon I will be headed in the library to see if I can learn more.